Hey guys, welcome back to r/ProRevenge. In this video, my boss told me I was just a bookkeeper and stole $4,000 from my final paycheck. She thought she had won, but what she didn't realize is that for 6 years I was not just doing the payroll, I was building a mountain of evidence against her illegal empire. And the first one is titled, "Smug Karen Owner Refuses to Pay Dumb Employee." So I used to work as a bookkeeper/office manager for a landscaping company. Let's call the owner Karen because that's basically what she was. I worked there for 6 years, handling everything from payroll to taxes to vendor payments. Basically, if money was involved, it went through me. Now, Karen was one of those self-made business owner types who thought she was God's gift to entrepreneurship. She started the company with her husband about 15 years ago, and to be fair, they built it up from nothing to a pretty successful operation. They had several full-time crews doing residential and commercial work, plus a separate division for snow removal in winter. The problem was Karen's success went straight to her head. She had this attitude that office workers were somehow beneath the real workers who did the actual landscaping. I cannot tell you how many times I heard her say stuff like, "Must be nice to sit in the AC all day," or "Anyone can enter numbers into a computer." She would make these comments in front of customers, other employees, vendors, didn't matter who was around. It was embarrassing. The thing is, I was not just entering numbers, I was literally running the financial side of her entire business. Processing payroll for 60 employees every week, managing accounts payable and receivable, handling tax filings, dealing with insurance claims, and negotiating with suppliers, the works. But in Karen's mind, I was just some secretary who pushed papers around. For 6 years, I kept my mouth shut because the pay was decent and the work was steady, plus I actually liked most of the crew guys. They were good people who worked hard and I made sure they got paid on time and their benefits were handled properly. Karen might not have respected what I did, but they did. Over those 6 years, I also saw a lot of things that didn't sit right with me. See, Karen liked to portray herself as this upstanding business owner, but behind closed doors, she was cutting corners left and right. And since everything financial went through me, I had a front row seat to all of it. First off, she was paying a bunch of guys under the table, not just occasional help. We are talking regular crew members who had been working there for years. She would hand them cash at the end of the week and tell me to record it as supplies or equipment rental or whatever. When I mentioned that this was not exactly legal, she would wave me off and say, "That's how construction works, honey. You would not understand." Then there was the whole 1099 contractor thing. Karen classified about half her full-time employees as independent contractors instead of employees. These guys were showing up every day, using company equipment, following company schedules, and taking direction from supervisors. Basically everything that screams employee according to the IRS. However, Karen didn't want to pay the employer portion of Social Security and Medicare taxes, so boom, contractors. And of course, she was also skimming cash payments like crazy. Customers would pay cash for smaller jobs and Karen would just pocket it. She would tell me, "This doesn't need an invoice," or "Just mark it as a discount on their account." I would watch her stuff hundreds of dollars in cash into her purse and then act like nothing happened. But the real kicker was how she inflated business expenses. Her kids' cars were listed as work vehicles, family vacations became business travel to scout new markets. Her daughter's college tuition was somehow employee training. She even tried to write off their pool installation as a client entertainment facility. The woman really had zero shame. I kept meticulous records of all of this stuff, not because I was planning anything, I just believe in covering your ass. Screenshots, exported reports, copies of invoices before Karen adjusted them, I had it all stored on a personal drive at home. Call it intuition or paranoia, but something told me that I would need evidence someday. Well, that someday came when I decided to leave. I'd been there 6 years and frankly, I was tired of watching Karen treat people like garbage while acting like she was some kind of business genius. I found a position with a local accounting firm that paid significantly better and came with actual respect from management. I gave Karen 2 weeks' notice on a Wednesday morning. Professional, polite, offered to help train whoever would be taking over my responsibilities, and her reaction was not great. "Well, that's just perfect," she said, not even looking up from her phone, "right in the middle of busy season. Typical." I explained that I'd stay the full 2 weeks and would put together a detailed handover notes for everything, but she just rolled her eyes. "Whatever, just make sure all the files are organized before you leave. And don't think you're getting paid for sitting around those last few days if there's nothing to do." That should have been my first red flag, but I figured she was just being her usual charming self. The real fun started the next week. I'd been working on transitioning everything to their new bookkeeper, Karen's nephew, who had exactly zero accounting experience, but was apparently good with computers. As I was training this kid on payroll processing, Karen comes storming into the office. "We need to talk about your PTO payout," she announced. I had 3 weeks of accrued vacation time, which worked out to about $4,000. It was clearly listed on every pay stub I'd ever received, and the employee handbook specifically stated that unused PTO would be paid out upon termination. What about it?" I asked. "Well, I've been thinking about it, and I don't think we should pay it out. You're abandoning us during our busiest time of the year, and frankly, you haven't been doing the job we hired you for anyway." I blinked at her. "What do you mean I haven't been doing my job?" "Well, all this handover training you're doing just proves you were not documenting processes properly. If you were really doing your job right, anyone should be able to step in and figure it out. The fact that my nephew needs training shows you were being lazy and sloppy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing here. "Karen, I've been documenting everything for years. I created the entire filing system you're using. The training is to make sure nothing gets missed during the transition." She waved her hand dismissively. "Look, I've decided we are not paying out the PTO, and your final paycheck is gonna be held until you complete a proper transition training program. I'm talking comprehensive documentation of every single process and procedure." "That's not legal, Karen." "The employee handbook clearly states—" "Oh, please," she interrupted. "What are you gonna do? Sue me? You're a bookkeeper. You enter numbers into QuickBooks and answer phones. Don't pretend you're some kind of professional who knows about employment law." That was it. That was the moment Karen sealed her fate. See, I might just be a bookkeeper, but I'd been handling her books for 6 years. I knew exactly how much tax fraud she had been committing, and I had evidence, but I played it cool. "Well, okay, Karen, I guess I will have to file a wage claim then." She laughed at me. "Go ahead, good luck with that. Do you have any idea how much I pay my lawyer? You think the state is gonna care about some disgruntled employee who cannot even do her job properly?" I finished out my 2 weeks with a smile on my face. Karen made a big show of inspecting my work and finding problems with everything. She nitpicked every file, every process, every document. Her nephew was taking notes like he was preparing for the bar exam. On my last day, she handed me my final paycheck minus the PTO payout, of course. "Remember," she said with a smug smile, "non-disclosure agreement is still in effect. I better not hear about you bad-mouthing this company around town." Of course not, Karen. I'm nothing if not professional. The first thing I did was file a wage claim with the state labor board. Karen was right about one thing, I was not a lawyer. But I knew how to read an employee handbook and I knew what documentation I needed. The claim was for the 3 weeks of unpaid PTO, plus penalties for withholding wages. It was an open and shut case, and the state ruled in my favor and ordered Karen to pay me the full amount plus additional penalties for illegal wage withholding. She had to cut me a check for almost $6,000. But that is when things got really interesting. See, Karen did not take losing gracefully. She started calling me a thief around town, telling anyone who would listen that I had stolen money from the company and that the state had been fooled by fake documentation. She called my new employer and tried to get me fired, claiming I was under investigation for embezzlement. That's when I decided to stop playing nice. I'd kept all those financial records for 6 years, thinking I might need them to cover myself someday. I never thought I would be using them to destroy someone's entire life, but Karen had made it personal. She wanted to call me a thief? She wanted to try to ruin my reputation and my career? Fine, let's see how she liked having her dirty laundry aired. I spent a weekend going through everything I had: bank statements, cash receipts, payroll records, tax filings, vendor invoices, the whole 9 yards. I organized it all chronologically and started documenting the patterns. What I found was worse than I'd even remembered. Karen had been systematically committing tax fraud for years. I'm talking about over $1 million in unreported income across the 6 years I worked there. The cash skimming alone accounted for probably $200,000. Add in the misclassified employees, the inflated business expenses, and the under-the-table payments, and we were looking at serious federal tax evasion. However, I wanted to be smart about this. I was not gonna just dump everything on the IRS and hope for the best. I contacted a tax attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases and laid everything out for him. That guy was practically drooling by the time I finished explaining the situation. We spent the next month preparing the whistleblower complaint. The attorney helped me organize the evidence and write up a comprehensive report detailing every violation we could prove. We are talking about a filing that was over 100 pages long with supporting documentation, but I didn't stop there. Karen had opened this door when she decided to destroy my reputation, so I was gonna walk through it with both guns blazing. I also filed complaints with the state for worker misclassification and with the Department of Labor for systematic wage theft. See, all those guys Karen was paying under the table, they were not getting overtime pay. And all those employees she classified as contractors, the state was very interested in the employer taxes she hadn't been paying, and all those cash payments she had pocketed. The IRS gets really cranky when you don't report income to them. The IRS whistleblower program is a beautiful thing. If they collect money based on your tip, you get between 15 and 30% of whatever they recover. And federal tax fraud penalties are no joke. We're talking about potential criminal charges, not just back taxes. I filed everything and then sat back to wait. The attorney warned me it could take a while. The IRS doesn't move fast on anything, but he was confident that we had a strong case. In the meantime, Karen's business was starting to have problems. The state labor investigation had triggered an audit of her worker classifications, and she was being forced to reclassify a bunch of employees. That meant paying back employment taxes plus penalties. The Department of Labor was also sniffing around looking into wage theft allegations, but Karen being Karen, she was still acting like nothing was wrong. Apparently she was telling people the investigations were just bureaucratic harassment and that she would fight them all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. That confidence lasted until the IRS showed up. I wasn't there when it happened, obviously, but I heard about it from one of the crew guys I stayed in touch with. They walked out with boxes and boxes of documents plus her computer hard drives. Karen tried to play it off at first. She told employees it was just a routine audit and that everything would be cleared up quickly. But when the IRS freezes your business accounts pending investigation, it is pretty hard to pretend that everything is normal. The local newspaper picked up the story about a month later. They did not name Karen specifically, but everyone in town knew who they were talking about. I mean, the landscaping industry here is not that big. That is when the dominoes really started falling though. Customers started canceling contracts left and right. Nobody wants to do business with someone who's under a federal investigation. Suppliers started demanding payment up front instead of extending credit. Several key employees quit because they were worried about the company's stability. But the real killer was when the state finished their investigation into worker misclassification. They determined that Karen owed way over $300,000 in back employment taxes, plus penalties and interest. The bill came due immediately. Karen tried to fight it, of course. She even hired lawyers and filed appeals and made a lot of noise about how the state was trying to destroy small businesses. But when you've been misclassifying employees for years and there's a paper trail proving it, there's not much wiggle room. The final nail in the coffin came when the IRS finished their audit. They determined that Karen had underreported her income by approximately $1.2 million over 6 years. The penalties and interest brought the total amount owed to over $2 million. Karen tried everything to avoid paying. She claimed the business was in financial distress and couldn't afford the full amount. She offered settlement proposals that were basically insulting. She even tried to claim that the whole thing was just a result of poor bookkeeping rather than intentional fraud. That last one really got to me. Here she was trying to blame me for her own criminal behavior. She was literally arguing that her dumb bookkeeper had been so incompetent that she accidentally committed tax fraud for 6 years. Well, sadly, the IRS was not buying it. They had too much evidence showing intentional concealment of income, the cash skimming, the fake business expenses, the deliberate misclassification of employees. It all pointed to systematic fraud rather than accidental mistakes. When it became clear that Karen couldn't pay the full amount owed, the government started seizing assets of hers. First, they put liens on the business equipment, then they went after her personal assets, the business trucks, the expensive machinery, even her personal vehicles got seized. Karen had to sell the company to try to cover the debt, but by then, the business was essentially worthless. Customer contracts had been cancelled, key employees had left, and the reputation was destroyed. She ended up selling the equipment and client list for maybe 30 cents on the dollar. But even that was not enough to cover what she owed. The government ended up seizing her house, her vacation property, pretty much everything she had built over 15 years of running the business. And the best part? That whistleblower reward was quite juicy. The landscaping company is completely gone now. The name, the reputation, everything Karen and her husband built up over 15 years, all destroyed because she was too cheap and too arrogant to pay her bookkeeper's final wages. The crew I liked had to find new jobs, which sucks, but most of them landed on their feet with other companies pretty quickly. Word gets around in that industry about who the good workers are. I'm doing great at my new job, by the way. Turns out when you work for people who actually respect your professional expertise, life is a lot more enjoyable. My boss actually asks for my input on financial decisions and treats me like the professional I am. Imagine that. The moral of the story? Well, don't screw over the person who handles your books. We see everything, we remember everything, and we know exactly how to make your life very difficult if you push us too far. Karen learned that lesson the hard way. It would have been so much cheaper to just pay me that $4,000, but I'm glad she didn't, because watching everything she built crumble to dust was honestly the most satisfying thing I've ever experienced. Sometimes people need to learn that actions do have consequences. And the next one is a fantastic malicious compliance story that is titled, I was forced to eat at a fancy restaurant for a month. Many years ago, I got put on a work assignment for months that required me to travel to New York City and stay every Monday to Friday. So I was assisting a company manager with a project, and my hotel was near his regular office in the theater district. If you're not familiar, the theater district is heavily built for tourists. Restaurants are generally kind of fancy and expensive, and there were really not any quick and cheap options for dining in that area. The company had a generous meal policy of up to $30 to $40 per meal for travel expenses. I did use that for a bit, but the food got to feeling too indulgent and kind of ridiculous given it was an extended assignment. Also, I was working really long hours and didn't want to go sit in restaurants. I just wanted to go watch TV and sleep in my room. So after the first week or so, I instead went to a grocery store on Monday night. I bought some basics for cereal, sandwiches, snacks, and some frozen meals I could microwave for lunch in the office. It cost about $60. I then took a few cans of soda from my hotel fridge to make room for my weekly food purchase and returned them before checking out at the end of the week, and that was it for food costs, with an occasional meal out here or there. I did the same the next 4 weeks, submitted my expense report at the end of the month. You know where this is going. A lady from accounting called me and refused to reimburse my expenses because apparently $60 is more than $40, the max allowance for one meal purchase. I explained that had covered 5 days of food, but was told it didn't matter. I then spent the next month trying all the food in the neighborhood. There were really not any cheap options. I went out to eat a few mornings, lunch whenever I found time, and dinner absolutely every day. I could have bought a few installments of groceries, but the once per week shopping convenience was part of why I had wanted them. It had also seemed wasteful for me to go out for an expensive meal every night for long-term travel, but now I'd been told it was preferred by accounting to my grocery bills. The next month I got a call from my NYC manager asking how I had run through more budget every week of the month than the entire month before combined. I explained the grocery situation, he thanked me and then hung up. About 10 minutes later, that same lady from accounting called me to tell me that they would pay my still not reimbursed grocery bill and any going forward as long as the daily amount averaged for the week was under the aggregate meal allowance. I happily returned to a more reasonable diet. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I lost my job and now I am being sued by my HOA law firm, but the law firm will not accept my payment. So basically, I asked the law firm / collection agency if I could pay before court, and I was told yes, as long as the amount is cashier's check or money order. I say okay, I will bring $1,000 by cashier check in person on Friday. The law firm then responds to say, no, the amount due is now $2,000 and we cannot accept the 1K. The 1K is what my lawsuit and all court documents say, but now the total is apparently $1,000 extra and it is $2,000 due. Can they refuse my 1K, which is the total indicated on the lawsuit in bold print, with attorney fees already included? It clearly indicates fees are already included. I literally tried to pay what they indicated I owe before the actual court date, but now I'm told that $1,000 amount is not unacceptable. I can pay the extra 1K if it is proven to be true, but not right now. And right now, I'm able to pay the past due amount listed on the lawsuit. Is this legal for the law firm to refuse the amount they have on the lawsuit on behalf of my HOA, and then refuse my payment for the amount on the lawsuit and now say by email that I owe $1,000 more than the lawsuit says? And a user in the comments said, document this and bring it to the judge at the court. The judge will not be amused that you offered to settle for the full amount and they refused. Comment number 2 said, was there a date that the amount had to be paid by before additional fees could accrue, or did it mention additional fees at all? By the way, just for future knowledge and for anyone else reading this, if you're in a bad situation where you know you cannot pay your HOA dues, please reach out to the member of your HOA board. I'm on an HOA board, and while we cannot reduce dues, we can choose to postpone any collections or legal referrals. If someone reaches out to us in this kind of situation, we are gonna work with them. In our case, this is largely because we have a good HOA board that truly cares about the neighborhood and our community. But even if we didn't, it's in the best interest of the HOA to avoid situations where a homeowner may be unable to afford to take care of their property, and especially avoid foreclosure or the need to quickly sell their home or something like that. Properties selling for lower than the current market price will drive down the value of all nearby properties. And now, thankfully, Ripestories, we have an update to the story that reads like this. First of all, thank you to everyone who gave me advice on my original post. You guys really helped me understand my rights and gave me the confidence to stand up for myself. So after getting that email claiming I suddenly owed $2,000 instead of the $1,000 stated in the lawsuit, I did exactly what many of you suggested. I documented everything. I printed out all the email exchanges, the original lawsuit documents showing the $1,000 amount, and even took screenshots of their website where they listed their fees. I showed up to court prepared. I brought 3 copies of everything, one for me, one for the judge, and one for their lawyer. I also brought the $1,000 cashier's check, just like they initially said they would accept. Well, when we got in front of the judge, their lawyer tried to argue that additional fees had accrued. The judge was not having any of it. She asked to see where these additional fees were documented in the original filing, and of course they weren't. The lawyer started stammering about standard procedures and ongoing costs. The judge shut that down real fast. She said, "Counselor, you filed a lawsuit for $1,000. Your client cannot arbitrarily double that amount without filing an amended complaint and providing proper documentation. Moreover, attempting to refuse payment for the amount stated in your own filing appears to be an attempt to generate additional fees in bad faith." Then something amazing happened. The judge asked me about my attempts to pay the original amount, and I showed her the email exchange where they first agreed to accept $1,000 and then suddenly refused it and demanded $2,000. And she was not pleased. So the judge ended up ruling that number 1, the law firm had to accept my $1,000 payment as full settlement, number 2, they had to provide a complete receipt and release of the lien, and they were barred from adding any additional fees related to this case. They also had to file a satisfaction of judgment within 5 business days. But here's the best part, the judge referred the law firm to the State Bar Association for review of their collection practices. She said their attempt to inflate the amount after filing and refusing payment of the stated amount could constitute ethical violations. So then I handed over my cashier's check right there in the courtroom. The lawyer looked like he had swallowed a lemon, but he had to accept it. I got my receipt, and within a week, I received confirmation that everything was cleared. The whole experience taught me that while HOAs and their lawyers can be intimidating, they are not above the law. Standing up for yourself and keeping good records really does make a difference. By the way, I'm still looking for work, but at least this weight is off my shoulders. Thanks again to everyone who helped me through this. Don't let these predatory practices scare you, just know your rights and fight back. And the next one is another malicious compliance story, which is titled "Walk Slowly So We Can Watch, Baby." Years ago, I worked as a cocktail bartender and waiter. A group of suits came in and sat down, and I went to take their order. I got a bad vibe of them from the get-go, and after I finished the order and went to leave, this 30-something sleazy guy said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Walk away slowly, baby, so we can watch." I smiled at him and started to do an overdramatic slow-motion back way, keeping eye contact with him and smiling the whole time. I told the other waiters about it, and everyone started doing these slow-motion walks whenever they walked past their table. The best one was a busboy who deliberately dropped something next to their table and then did a very slow and sexy pickup like the bend and snap from Legally Blonde. They left pretty quickly. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.